Hello everybody and welcome to this 9 at 9. It's my pleasure to be with you today and to actually be handling this podcast a little differently. I have a guest. I feel like I'm like an in-studio host or something, but I have a great guest to chat with us today about some specific questions and actually this podcast and over the next couple of 9 at 9s, specific questions that you have asked that we address. So my guest today is a long-term colleague. We've worked together for over 15 years. She is our Vice President of Research and Development, not only of the Dermalogica products, but also of our curriculum and our educational product. She oversees the whole technology behind Dermalogica and then how we teach that and educate the industry around the world with it. I'm joined by Dr. Diana Howard. Welcome, Diana.
Hi.
So today I wanted to talk about a subject that you've asked me about and asked that we address, and that is the concept of using certain ingredients for certain results in the product. And the ingredient that I wanted to ask Dr. Diana Howard about today is hidrokinon. A lot of you have asked us about it, and I want to just refresh your memory, Diana, because not that you will have forgotten it, but in 1994, I well remember when you joined us 15 years ago, one of the first conversations we had, and you were very passionate about it, and you educated us all about it, was the fact that we had a product called Superfade.
Right.
And it was a skin lightening product with a 2% hidroquinone. And we were one of the only professional skincare companies that actually had that sort of a product. Latterly, of course, everyone's introduced that kind of product with hydroquinone, but you made a very strong recommendation, which we followed, that we needed to remove that product from the Dermalogica lineup because hydroquinone, in your opinion, and based on a lot of scientific work, was not a safe ingredient. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because we're now 15 years later. I see a lot of hydroquinone products in the United States market. We have never used that ingredient again because there's a lot of research to say that it's not safe. Is that not so?
Absolutely. In 1994, the Journal of American College of Toxicology published a report, and their summary findings basically stated that hydroquinone was not safe for topical use. It is a cytotoxic, which means it's cyto meaning cell, toxic to a cell, it's mutagenic, it's a carcinogen. They flat out state in this final report that it should not be used topically on the skin. And based on these findings, and I could go into the science behind it for hours, but we won't. Based on these findings, it's just not safe because, as you know, we talked about from the very beginning, the one thing Dermalogica had to take into account was it had to be safe and it had to be effective.
Yeah.
And so we removed the hydroquinone. And since then, it's resurfaced again. Its safety is questionable. And there's a lot of controversy around it right now. But this is a perfect example of how a strong lobbying body, basically the American Medical Association, has gone to the US FDA, and they have managed to say, this is the one tool we have in our arsenal that really, really works. We are licensed medical doctors. We should be allowed to use it. And so they've continued to use it. And that was about 2 years ago that they questioned whether or not they were going to ban it again.
Right, because we were hearing all sorts of things that the FDA was getting ready to gear up and release a directive that would remove hydroquinone, well, especially from over-the-counter products.
Absolutely.
But that just hasn't happened. So that's the backstory.
That's the backstory, and it's incredible because I love to go into whether it's a Sephora or a department store, and I always, go in there like a consumer and play very naive and ask, what do you recommend for pigmentation? And everybody recommends a hydroquinone product, and I say, but I've heard some safety issues. And, I always get these people who are really uneducated saying, oh, it's fine, it's absolutely fine. They would ban it if it was dangerous.
Right.
It's banned in every country other than the United States.
That's right. I mean, many of you are watching this in one of the 51 countries outside of the United States that Dermalogica is available, and you well know that hydroquinone is banned pretty much everywhere else in the world other than in the United States, which makes it confusing because most people think of the FDA and of the United States as being very, very regulated and having the safest products, which by and large is true, but this is an odd example.
It's a very unique example. It really shows you the power of a strong lobbying like the Medical Association. And it's unfortunate, and sometimes people will say, well, you can use hydroquinone, but use it only for 2 months and then stop. My feeling is if we know it's got questionable safety track record, Why subject yourself
Well,
to it?
especially as skin therapist, I believe. I mean, our primary motivation is to deliver the healthiest skin and safe treatments that deliver results. And it's a balance of those two things. There's no argument, I think, that hydroquinone lightens pigmentation. I mean, that's not the debate. Although I will say that when I lived in South Africa, and you've traveled in South Africa, Diana, and taught there many times, there is a high incidence, and this sounds kind of strange, but there's a high incidence of hyperpigmentation after using hydroquinone because the chemical is photosensitive.
It's a disease called onchronosis. And actually what's happening in many cultures where it's very important to try to lighten pigmentation, such as in South Africa and Asia, there's a tendency to go up to 8% hydroquinone. When you combine 8% hydroquinone with UV radiation, you can actually create hyperpigmentation.
And you see that.
And you know, what's really interesting is studies that I have read show that 25% of the population, just the population at large, regardless of where you live, gets contact dermatitis to hydroquinone. You know,
I've seen that too.
There's no doubt about it. It is one of the most effective skin whiteners, lighteners.
Right.
But unfortunately, there are a lot of negatives associated with that.
Too much negativity, too many cons, not enough pros.
Absolutely.
And even though it lightens pigmentation, so I have to ask this because just you know me. Even though it lightens pigmentation, I mean, no one's listening. And we both of us, we're always sharing our skin stories and our pigmentation stories and, you know, and how do we tackle it. I mean, would you ever use it, even though it's legally allowed in the United States but banned most other places? Would you ever use hydroquinone for pigmentation for yourself?
That's a great question because I have some stubborn pigmentation, whether it's hormonally induced, whether it's sun exposure, regardless of the cause of it. Some of it is in the dermis. You can't affect that topically. Hydroquinone has been